Trev's Hockey Show. I'm the Trev. That's too sweet. So today we're going to tackle something new. Now it still relates to NHL history in a way. It did more to help establish the way best on best tournaments would go with NHL involvement and influence. Now, before the World Cup of Hockey, or even before the NHL's involvement in the Olympics, there was the Canada Cup. But before we talk about that, or at least the tournaments, which we inevitably will, let's give a brief bit to talk about how it all came to be. Now, having said that, let's talk about it. So the Canada Cup really came about thanks to the early definitions, or at least the definitions in the 60s and 70s, set in place by the International Ice Hockey Federation in what constituted as an amateur and professional player. Now, essentially, Canada's best amateurs weren't even in the NHL yet at this point, due to draft age. And in a best-on-best setting, Canada's best players essentially play professionally, either in the National Hockey League or in the World Hockey Association. Now, this is essentially the decision that led to Hockey Canada boycotting the Olympics and the World Championships during the 1970s, as their best players would never be called amateurs, compared to the teams in Europe or in the Soviet Union who were classified as amateurs year-round, even though they play professional exhibition year-round, most of the time anyway. Now, in its place, Hockey Canada and the Soviet Union, thanks to a huge demand for best-on-best, especially between the two nations, staged two very successful summit series. Obviously, the more well-known everybody knows from 1972, which Canada won, and the one less talked about in 1974. Now, the biggest difference between the two, obviously, the fact that they lost the one in 74, the Canadians that is. The one in 72 was played with NHL players, the one in 74 was played with WHA players. So, well, 1-for-1 against the best professionals in North America. Now, thanks in large part to both of these series, the demand only grew higher for best on best with more nations. And that's where we begin. So thanks in large part to Doug Fisher of Hockey Canada and Alan Eagleson of the NHLPA, talks were in place for such a future tournament. And after a round of successful negotiations with hockey officials from the Soviet Union, as well as other Eastern Bloc countries, plans for the first tournament were starting to take shape. P.S. If you want me to talk about Eagleson, let me know. I mean, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of do we have to, but his place in hockey, as infamous as it might be, is still there. And not after long, the first tournament was organized and set to take place from September 2nd to 15th, 1976, between host cities in Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, Quebec City, and Philadelphia, which included 6 different nations of amateurs and professional players. So all games in the Canada Cup tournament, whether it be 76 or any other tournament, were all played with NHL rules on NHL-sized ice. And while I get the purpose of that, being it is an NHL-controlled tournament and influenced by the NHL, I'm different. I prefer the international ice surface, but that would take a lot of renovations. But it's not to say that playing on NHL-sized ice didn't create any memories, because it created a whole bunch of them. Now all tournaments were played during the NHL's off-season, as not to interfere with the NHL schedule and for the best opportunity for players to be available. And so, as mentioned, the first tournament took part in 1976, with the second tournament taking place in 1981, third tournament coming in 1984, the fourth taking place in 1987, and the last one being played in 1991. And as mentioned, we will go through all 5 of them. Now, as for nations that competed within the Canada Cup, it was pretty universal between the Big 6, which consisted of Canada, Team USA, the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Team Sweden, and Team Finland, with the exception of the 1984 series, where Finland was replaced with a team from West Germany. Now, the playoff format for every series was pretty different almost all the time. In 1976, the series was played as round-robin style, with each team playing 5 games, with the best 2 nations making it to the best of 3 final before being switched up to a 5-game round-robin and a 1-game semifinal and final for 1981. 1984 would see the best of 3 finals put in place for the last 3 tournaments, so 84, 87, 91, all turned into a best of 3. Now, as far as the trophy is concerned, well, it's exactly like it looks. Being named the Canada Cup and all, it looks exactly like half of a maple leaf. And it's also made out of solid nickel. So, yeah, it looks pointy. It looks like it could be a weapon if you use it right, but that's just my own first observation. Now, as far as what the legacy of the Canada Cup meant, well, it was something that was looked forward to by a lot of players, a lot of fans too. I mean, some, or at least most, of the most memorable international moments come from the Canada Cup tournaments. You know, especially if your name's Gretzky and Lemieux. I mean, not only did it give professionals a chance to compete in bests on bests, because the Olympics were just not a go at the time, it also helped expose a lot of the European / Iron Curtain players to a Western style kind of game. I mean, it might not be on the same level of a World Championship or an Olympics, but as far as best on best and international play, it still meant a lot. And with all this international exposure, it only helped flourish the game internationally. But if you can take away the Eaglesons out of the equation, and sure, it'd be a lot better, it'd be a lot more thought well of, but it's easy to remove a guy like Eagleson. Just remember some of the best plays that came out of these games. And I mean, the fact that it was regularly scheduled between 3 and 5 years, it was always one of those things like, if you didn't get enough hockey in those years, you got more. And then, one season ends, you get this, another season begins. It was like clockwork. So, either way, looking forward to jumping into each and every one of these tournaments, talking about them. It's another one of them Trev's Hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've made it to this point. If you have made it to this point, just know that I do appreciate you very, very much. And don't be afraid. Give me a like. Hit that thumbs up button. If you like what I'm doing, if you're following along, if you've made it to this point, even if you just want to say hi, I'm down for that. So hit that thumbs up if you want to. If you haven't done so yet, that red button that says subscribe all over it, come on, you know you want to. I know you want to. You know I want you to. It'll help you feel good. And it'll help the algorithm too, so let's make that happen. Link to my Facebook page. It's in the description below. Let's move forward. As far as the Canada Cup is concerned, like I said, I got 5 tournaments I want to talk about. And there's the World Cup after that. But either way, I'm keeping myself busy. So in the meantime, and in between time, be looking for more videos from Trev. Beta.